And now I'd like to welcome up Luke McCormack, Matt Gilkeson, and Kevin Fiftal for our next panel discussion. Mr. Matt Gilkeson serves as Director of the Innovation Task Force at the Transportation Security Administration and is also serving as the Acting Executive Director for Capability Management and Innovation. Mr. Kevin Fiftal is the Managing Director for Cloud at Intel Public Sector. And moderating for us today is Mr. Luke McCormack, former CIO at the Departments of Homeland Security and Justice and a member of our HSDF Senior Advisory Committee. We look forward to your discussion, gentlemen. Please come up and have a seat.
I was going to start out by doing what I often start out with, which is thanking all of you in this room for everything that you do every day. Certainly all the folks that are in federal service, that have been in federal service, and those that are helping the folks in federal service. And I'm going to give you my pitch on federal service. If you haven't tried that, I encourage all of you to give it a shot because it tastes great, and you'll never regret it. It's one of the most proudest things you'll ever do. And I can tell you that there's no doubt that this gentleman here from TSA and Sonny from CBP and the folks from FEMA, et cetera, need the talent, right? They're always looking for more talent because the mission continues to increase. So that's my plea to all of you to consider federal service because you won't regret it. With that, we're going to start off here with two distinguished gentlemen. Matt Gilkeson, he's the Acting Executive Director for Capability Management and Innovation at Transportation Security Administration. Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
All right, and then your permanent role is?
Director of Innovation Task Force.
Okay, and we'll get you to explain that in a minute.
Yeah.
And Kevin Fiftal, who's the Managing Director for Cloud Intel Public Sector. We're talking about hybrid cloud. We're talking about multi-cloud. We're going to talk about a couple of other things as well. Kevin, I thought we'd start with you. Sure. And ask you just a baseline as we get into this conversation. Just for the audience, not to offend anybody, just give us a one-on-one definition of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. What is that, just so we're on the same page there?
Sure. So my role at Intel is that essentially I'm in front of the departments and agencies that you spoke about, federal agencies, state and local agencies, every day, 3, 4, 5 meetings. And everyone appears to have a different definition on this. So I always go back to 2011 when Tim Grants and Peter Mell defined this, because they defined it for the U.S. government in the document on cloud computing. And cloud computing, of course, is a ubiquitous network making up servers and network and storage and everything. Hybrid cloud to us, and within that document, is at least 2 systems. It may be a private cloud. We're working with a lot of private clouds right now, where a traditional OEM like Dell is the basis of that. We're finding hybrid clouds that are stack type of basis that is between the on-prem and the regular public cloud. And we're just seeing a lot of data centers in private cloud talking now to the major hyperscalers, the CSP, as far as that's concerned. Multi-cloud to us, we define multi-cloud as multiple hyperscalers or multiple CSPs. It's our biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis right now. I go very deep as far as security when we're talking about that, but multi-cloud is CSPs, hyperscalers, hybrids, 2 clouds talking to each other in that fashion.
All right, fantastic. And how about we're going to sprinkle in a little zero trust here, undoubtedly, in this conversation. So can you take a crack at Zero Trust 101?
So zero trust. What do we look at that for?
Basic definition,
NIST,
so that we're all on the same
NIST
page.
SP, what was it, 800-207? Zero trust, of course, is a paradigm, a framework of trust and verify. What had been a castle, a moat, high walls is now identity access. It's made up of a series of components that you need to trust and verify as far as your entire IT system is. The challenge, of course, in zero trust is take it across what Chris was just talking about, take it across your entire network. And that's where all our challenges right now are, Luke.
Yeah, and I failed to to state the last piece of that, which I normally do, and that's the architecture, right? It's an architecture, and I think that's really important. Matt, I said a mouthful when I was describing your role or announcing your role. Give us a little bit more on what is that role that you're in now, and why is that important to TSA?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. And
Our pleasure.
Most everybody, I think, is probably familiar with TSA. We're the most forward-facing federal agency. We typically have the opportunity to interact with everybody who's traveling. We have 440 federalized airports for the numbers, kind of 2 million passengers a day, or over 750 million passengers that are traveling every day, or every year, excuse me. And in that, we vet 29 or 50,000 security officers are in the process of helping us do that. So you have an idea of the size and scale of the agency, largest kind of transportation security enterprise in the world. The role that I have is capability management, and innovation is a role that covers the lead business authority for the agency. So we have a set of capability managers that we stood up about 4 or 5 years ago to pivot TSA from talking about technology specifically that's performing the screening functions to talking about the capability areas that we need to have access to perform those functions. Meaning, examples, canines, on-person screening, carry-on property screening, check baggage, counter UAS, detect, track, and identify. Each of those capability areas has a manager that's looking at the full life cycle of material and non-material solutions. And within that, we're defining the research and development aspects of kind of what capability we need to develop to be able to deliver and enhance that mission, passenger experience, and security effectiveness. And so, dovetailing to that, nexus back to the topic of the day, we can't do that at this point. I think we've reached a point where the technology that we have operating in a disconnected environment cannot get us more capability without the connectivity. So our CIO, Yemi, asked me to come and cover for him because he's traveling. But in that process, in that conversation, we're actively working to try and drive that connectivity of the equipment so that we can then take it to the next level of capacity and capability by leveraging all the power that the cloud, the software aspects can bring to us.
Yeah, no question, and I'm sure we'll get into this once you're sort of connected back to some of these capabilities. All of a sudden, you have all this massive compute, this AI, this ML, et cetera. Kevin, let me bounce back over to you and talk about, let's talk about Intel's journey in regards to implementing a multi-cloud, a hybrid cloud. Maybe you're doing both, maybe you're doing one or the other. I would suspect you're doing it in a global environment. So just walk us through that journey that you all have been on.
Sure. So we actually just delivered this for 3 hours this morning, the same discussion. And then on a very confidential basis.
We've got 30 minutes.
We got 30 minutes. I better either speed up or say less.
Yeah.
So, but we can speak very deeply on this as far as a confidential basis. But we believe as, one of the world's global organizations, we can take the best practices at our IT at Intel, which we even write white papers on this. And I think it's going to come up here, some of the white papers that we've written as far as being a cloud broker internally, right?
I think they're going to publish that actually out on the shared space.
Right, they'll be publishing that. So our journey, it has been, one that we really started in 2013. And I'm going to really focus on the security side more than anything on that. But we developed it because, of course, like everything else in similar to the federal government, our sprawl of data centers was just ubiquitous. Our ability to fill those data centers with applications and workloads and solutions wasn't nearly as ubiquitous, right? We didn't find the efficiencies that we wanted within our own IT organization. So back in 2013, we started moving to private cloud. And on the security side, which is very interesting, today, where I'll go in a second, is we believe that the cloud native security elements of the major CSPs have been terrific. There's been a terrific development as far as their capabilities in the last several years. But where we started was what we knew, the on-premise. So we used all those same on-premise security tools for many years, really until 2018, we started moving much more into the cloud and using the native tools out of the three major hyperscalers. So what that created was a little bit of a clunky type of approach between on-prem and the cloud, right? So in 2018, we wrote our first paper. And if you have a chance to read it, it's great. It gave us a snapshot of what Intel had done up to that point as far as security. But it's, now, 5 years old as far as that journey is concerned. But then in 2021, we updated it. And our approach from the on-prem right through the major CSPs is that we take all the cloud-native tools from the cloud service providers. We put it into not all the records or all the streams, but we put it into a Splunk with a Apache Kafka type of approach using Confluent streams, if you know some of these organizations.
Very common methods.
We bring it down into what we call our cyber intelligence panel. We create dashboards across the organizations, and we trust and verify per our InfoSec type requirements. So the journey, Luke, has been a great one from using our tools across a clunky environment in CSPs to what we believe is a pretty tight trust and verify framework as far as security is concerned, utilizing the native CSP tools.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And as you see here, we have sort of two different dimensions of the spectrum here that we're working with. So just sort of work with us as we kind of bounce back and forth, because we'll continue to sort of close these together. And Matt, I'm going to ask you, it was interesting to hear your role there about capturing these and focusing on the requirements themselves, the capabilities. What does that interface look like as you have those entities that are performing that role? At what point does that type of information, and how does it get over, and sort of what form does it get over to the CIO's organization? What's sort of the flow there? I think the audience would be interested in that.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's been and is an ongoing conversation around how we address some of that opportunity, right? We are looking for being able to partner with that IT organization to move beyond just the end user services, the day-to-day kind of office back-end appliances and things like that, to enabling the IT aspects of the equipment in the field. So those capability managers set roadmaps. They're published. They're available. Everybody can see them. And within those roadmaps, we've defined advancements that we want to make to incorporate third-party capabilities, more specifically a joint declaration that we signed internationally with the idea of open architecture, bringing the concepts of what other segments of industry have already done, opening the stack, if you will, on the technology side for screening, so that we can then better leverage artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the tools that then come with the cloud environments that Kevin mentioned. It's really a direct partnership to try and make sure that the cybersecurity principles are in place, the access and the zero trust that you mentioned, Luke, are verified, so that the end users, our officers, can then leverage the components of the software.
And what is the sort of interface relationship with the transportation carriers and say the port authorities, et cetera? Because I know you all are sort of embedded into those environments. You're operating in those environments. In some cases, you're actually leveraging each other's capabilities and technologies. How does that work as far as from the capability standpoint, get imparted on those entities and partners?
To in some cases, to pull a quote from Red Hat earlier, there is data being left on the floor. Right, we're physically, partnered with those carriers, with those airports, and in many cases, it's a sneaker net conversation where we are physically at a local level sharing information and sharing data, and we're looking to transform that into a better digital environment. We can't do what we do without those airports and those airlines. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. And at the end of the day, our passengers that we're screening are the airlines and airports customers. So there's a vested stake that they have in the conversation, and so within that, it's a full public-private partnership. The screening spaces that we have, the queue layouts, those are all negotiation and collaborations with the airport authorities. Because TSA doesn't, unknown fact, doesn't own the queues. Mm-hmm. And so we depend upon
CBP's
those
in the
folks.
same situation.
Right, exactly. And so, the other piece of it that's kind of in there in terms of interface, you mentioned CBP, and I'll hit this. We have an incredible amount of opportunity that we've started to partner with CBP from a data sharing perspective, right? So every time a passenger books a flight, that name information goes into the DHS systems, and then if it's an international flight, it goes over to CBP, and if it's a flight in general that's coming over the United States or anything that TSA is regulating, all that information is flowing into Secure Flight. We perform our vetting services and vetting systems in that Secure Flight environment, and then push a vetting result back to the airlines that they then print on the boarding pass. Well, recently we've been able to deploy what we call CAT, Credential Authentication Technology. TSA's achieved something few have. Cats and dogs are getting along. We have canines in the checkpoint. We have cats in the checkpoint.
Boom.
And the Credential Authentication Technology is connected to Secure Flight. So in real time, we're able to now provide that vetting information to the fingertips of the officers performing the screening. So we're not depending upon a paper boarding pass that's printed out and hand carried around. It's a digital verification of the demographic information that's pulled from the credential that's presented. We've taken it a step further, and we're now doing one-to-one matching, biometric matching, on the CAT2 system, where the credential that's presented, by the way, there's a partnership with Apple, and we have a mobile driver's license ISO standard that we leaned in and helped create. And so we can use the mobile driver's license, we can use the American Airlines digital ID that they've launched. Other airlines are working on similar concepts, or the physical credential to pull that demographic information, validate that the ID and the credential being provided is valid, and then match that to Secure Flight for the passenger information, capture the image that's on the credential, and do a biometric match. So now we've been able to fully automate that kind of front-end process using that network connectivity that we need for the other pieces of the system. We're taking it a step further with the partnership with CBP, because they have the travel verification system, which houses existing government holdings of biometric information, primarily the State Department, passport and visa information. And they've been able to provide an API for us to be able to interface with that system. And with partnership at Delta Airlines in Detroit and in Atlanta, we're able to allow passengers to opt in to provide their passport number in pre-check, to allow that data flow to happen over to CBP, who then creates a pool of a gallery of information, gallery of images, for us to be able to do one-to-many matching. So when that passenger shows up to Delta's bag drop area, it's a biometric match, no credential required, to their Secure Flight information. When they show up to screening, same thing happens. When they show up to board the plane, the same thing happens. For CBP's use case, they launched travel verification systems so they could automate the exit concept, and they could start validating beyond the manifest who's actually exited the country. And so if you're boarding an international flight, many of the airports and airlines have started equipping their gates with camera technology that allows that travel verification system to capture the exit, but also enable a biometric boarding of the aircraft.
Closer and closer to a full touchless type of experience there, which is fascinating. Way up the value chain here, which is awesome. We're gonna knock it down a couple notches, or at least one notch. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you, once you had implemented your cloud environment,
Right.
what was the most obvious thing that you all discovered as far as, capability enablement, right? What was sort of whether it's an aha moment or something that you expected or something that was very obvious and is now just, sort of table stakes?
Sure.
Beyond sort of the speeds and feeds and the security, from a capability standpoint, that you realize, wow, we didn't expect this, or we did expect this, and we're so glad it's here because I don't know how we live without it.
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple things. First, on capability is just timing, right? So we'll start from when the initial request came in to build whatever it was, a website, a new server application, a dev environment in some ways, through our InfoSec and through our network people and our infrastructure people. 30 days later, we would respond, right? The capability, once we launched our 2018 activities, was that we were doing it in one day, right? We now do it because we have so many requests in 3 to 4 days, but we're standing up entire environments in that particular time frame. What's also interesting to us is if you all have worked in a true IT environment, the IT people like to grade everything as far as gold and silver and bronze. So every group that we speak with internally, they want the gold standard, but of course they only want to pay for the coal rather than not even the bronze. They don't want to pay for anything. So the capability that has become probably our most important one, and we believe we're cloud brokers internally. We have account managers, we have cloud brokers, and all of these other things, is the financial ops side of our business, right? So we have gone through just a lot of different products across a multi-cloud environment as far as financial operations are concerned. And so the greatest capability we can give right now back to our users, and we represent their dollars, on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, et cetera, is where they sit in their spend. That's a great capability within IT whenever we're really watching our dollars. So we can talk the features and functionalities and time that we've saved people, et cetera, the agile nature of things, et cetera. But a lot of times, the greatest capability people talk with us about is that you have delivered me the financial results in a dashboard in a very easy fashion that I can follow on any given project as we move through this. And that's the number one question we get asked daily within the U.S. federal government, and particularly at state levels, is what are the FinOps tools? What do you guys recommend as FinOps tools? And what has been your journey as far as that? And the answer is make sure that's done, right up front. Great capability without going into features and functions.
Yeah, transparency and at the speed of mission. It sounds fantastic. I should have mentioned at the beginning here that we're going to field questions as we go. So if you have any from the audience or you have any online, we're doing a little electronic mojo here. And I got a couple here. I have one that was very similar to one of the ones I was going to ask. So I'm going to sort of merge it together for you, Matt. And it's about just the type of technology that you're observing as you go through this capabilities process. At some point, you say, hey, listen, we need to be able to see through that wall. And then there's some technology that starts to emerge as far as prototyping, or et cetera. People are interested to hear about what some of the emerging technology that you are looking at, that you're getting excited about, that's sort of on the horizon here.
Yeah, sure. So, we talked about CAT and the deployment there. We as an agency have pushed forward with a significant advancement in our detection capability with the computed tomography technology, where we're bringing 3D imaging essentially the same as a CAT scan and the same as the explosive detection systems that have been in check baggage for a long time, shrinking those down to be able to put those into the checkpoint. We've been able to combine those with material handling systems. So essentially you have a miniature bag handling system in the checkpoint. And it's called the Checkpoint Property Screening System, that really then gives us a full automation of moving the bins and screening items through the checkpoint and through screening. We're looking to challenge industry and hoping that we can get some new technology with regard to on-person screening. We've been doing the stop and pose business for a long time, and we need to get that kind of metallic, non-metallic threat detection capability for screening at speed. We want to be able to walk through. On the verge of taking all those technologies and combining them together is a prototype concept that we're hoping to be able to get out in the field in the next year or so, is self-service screening. So we with the pandemic, with COVID, we've realized people want to be able to move at their own pace. A lot of your grocery stores have already moved in that direction. There's a couple Walmart stores that don't have any manned checkout stations. It's all self-service. And so we believe that we can apply that concept in the screening environment, where we provide multiple stations, you self-serve and screen at your own speed. You have a virtual divest assistant that will help you with the divest instructions if you need them, and will be able to move you through the checkpoint. As we look at that piece of it, we've got a concept we're pushing forward with called dynamic screening, where we want to be able to capitalize on that secure flight information I talked about at the front end of the credential authentication technology, and then pass that through all the way as the passenger journey continues through the checkpoint, so that our screening algorithms and our systems can dynamically adjust up and down based on the risk of the passenger. So you wouldn't have to necessarily, if your family doesn't have pre-check, you wouldn't have to separate from them and send them through a standard lane and be pre-check in the pre-check lane. You could do it together in one lane and get the risk appropriate screening based on your risk information that we have for you at that screening opportunity. Those are a couple of the big technology advancements that we're looking for. Within that data capture system, that's a significant data processing opportunity, right? We had a demonstration we just completed out in Las Vegas in the checkpoint, and we're looking at moving that demonstration to the checked baggage area. It was a partnership between 5 different companies. It was called Storm, one of which was Dell, who I know is sponsoring this. That gave us the dynamic screening capability, and we were able to actively pass the information so an officer looking at a bag knew the risk information associated with the passenger as they were transiting through the checkpoint. We're looking at being able to do that for checked baggage as well, be able to understand kind of some of the stream of commerce to improve the detection algorithms and feed that back in to allow us to enhance the objects and materials that we're recognizing for screening.
And it certainly seems like you're going to need this sort of ultimate connected environment. We'll talk about that in a minute, sort of, on-prem there, if you will. I think it's going to be super important. All right, Kevin, let me ask you a question. We got another one from the audience here, a little bit of a twist. What are your thoughts on Executive Order 14028 on cybersecurity and Executive Order 14058 on customer experience? How do these tie into the cloud efforts?
Well, I think, first of all,
The 2 different sides of that spectrum there, but that's okay.
so if I can start with a different executive order, which is 13636, right, which is the original cyber order, right? And what came out of that was a cybersecurity framework. I wish I had Chris's question. You say, well, how do you guys match up to that? Well, Intel, when I was the co-author, we wrote the world's first white paper on how we did the cybersecurity framework, right? And the undersecretary had asked us to do that. And I remember myself looking at our policy guy saying, that's a big task, because no one in 2015 wanted to handle that question, right? Because everyone thought you're going to be a target for something. If you showed them exactly how you've handled a framework, you become a target for that. And only 900 legal hours later, we solved the problem. We wrote the paper, more than anything else. So the new executive orders for us are, they have built upon that, Luke, more than anything, right? So if you look, at the 2 most recent ones, and I've got to tie in the CHIPS Act into that as well, they're basically a much further definition of a framework that the U.S. government wants, right? And it almost fits into what Zero Trust, whether it's the experience side, if we can just bring them together, or the standard framework. You want to be able to say that I have a plan, right? Maybe it's built into your InfoSec area, right? Maybe it's built into what we call our framework. But I love the executive order from the standpoint that it's simply defining, rather than a series of functionalities, it's defining what we all really need with a basic template, if that really answers the question. The CHIPS, and this is what builds, again, what Chris from Red Hat was talking about, the CHIPS Act and HSDF ran 2 days ago a interview with Kevin Stein at NIST. And what Kevin brought up is where the basis for what Chris is going to talk about is that hardware will become the basis for a renewed focus as far as hardware-rooted trust and cybersecurity, because we can do that in chips, right? It gives Chris and the Red Hat people and all the open source people the ability to build upon a very secure template so that they can put this open source together. So whatever comes up, whatever the new thing is, right? Whatever the new executive order is, Luke, maybe it's on user experience, maybe it's on something else. We're building this template in the US government better than any other government in the world on how we're gonna run our business in a secure fashion.
Yeah, it's really burned into that silicon, and it's, sort of something that is locked in, don't really need to concern yourself with it.
Right, and then you have people like Red Hat who can build on top of it, right?
Sure.
The open source.
Got another one from the field here. There's a little curveball for you, Matt. How has data sharing evolved with the move to the cloud environment? Has TSA investigated the use of distributed ledger technologies to enable broader access to data? You talked a lot about sharing data. I'm assuming you're doing that through APIs with other components, et cetera. But distributed ledgers? Is that something you guys are doing?
Yeah.
You've been thinking about doing it?
So-
You're already doing it?
So let me tackle that one, but before I do, I'll back up to the previous question on customer experience, because
Sure.
I think we have a large customer base that we can talk about.
And you're all the way at the front end of that,
and
for sure.
We're way ahead of it, right? So we've got a large effort afoot inside TSA to enhance the customer experience. That's across the spectrum, whether it be simply the Ask TSA concept. So our Civil Rights and Liberties and Ombudsman Office runs an Ask TSA account with our public affairs team, that if you have questions about what you can bring in your check bag or your carry-on bag, you can take a picture of it, you could tweet it to us, and we'll respond, and we'll
Hey.
tell you. Hey,
I never knew that.
hey, this is or isn't.
I'm always
gonna
jamming
be
on the
allowed.
website. Yes,
Right.
that's fantastic.
A couple of months ago, I got we trickled down through to capabilities management. We got a question, because our office holds the procedures as well. We got a question from Congress, wanted to know if they could take a gavel through the checkpoint. And I just took the email and pivoted right over to Twitter and said, hey, what's the answer? And spit it right back out. No, don't bring a gavel to the checkpoint.
I was going to say, you got to tell us what the answer is.
No,
Yeah, okay.
don't bring a gavel to the checkpoint.
Okay.
But that's an incredible amount of work that we're doing on Ask TSA. We've looked at incorporating some bot technology to help us answer some of the simple questions, maybe get into the object recognition capacity. So if you're looking at those images, we'll have an idea of what they're asking us about. We've also taken a step forward with our on-person screening systems. Our partners are developing low false alarm rate algorithms, which means that we don't have to pat down as many folks. Nobody wants to get touched. And with the previous technologies that TSA had, we have an avatar that tells us where a threat is on someone, which is why we do targeted pat downs. But if we can reduce that alarm rate, better detection comes from that, and we can reduce the times we have to pat somebody down. So that's an enhancement we're making on the customer experience side as well. Then the Aviation Security Advisory Committee has launched a Passengers with Disabilities conversation to focus in and look at how we can improve the experience for those passengers as well. TSA has a special contact team that if you have a disability, you can call us 24 hours before your flight, and we will provide a passenger services specialist that will help you through the screening process. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes folks are contacting the airlines and letting them know that they have special services needs. And so what we're trying to do at the local level is increase the data sharing, and then maybe at the enterprise level, look at how we can automate that data sharing to better be aware of passengers with disabilities and special needs through the screening process, both at the time of reservation through an airline or at the time of screening, and vice versa. So, distributed ledger. I don't know that we've actually implemented any kind of distributed ledger concepts. We certainly would be open to exploring them and looking at how that value chain could come from that. With the deployment of the credential authentication technology that I mentioned earlier, we are looking at how we can do some security data exchanges with the airlines to better understand and be aware of passengers across the journey. Where their touch points are with the airlines versus where their touch points are with us, so that we know who's coming inbound, if you will, from a bag check perspective, and we know who's boarded the flight and at the gate, and the airlines could be aware of who's been screened in the checkpoint. So those are data sharing things that we're looking at. And then at an aggregate level, we've also started piloting info sharing through the CAT technology of passenger arrival information, so that we can then start deriving a better passenger arrival profile to do predictive analytics for staffing and scheduling, so that we know how many lanes to have open and closed at any given time to better optimize that. Our team, the Innovation Task Force, did a demonstration back in 2017 or so of a cloud technology that allowed us to do that staffing and scheduling modeling piece, so that we knew within a 15-minute increment kind of what the predictive wait time was going to be, so that we knew when to open and close lanes. And what we found through that demonstration was a decrease in overtime, an increase in actual officer confidence in their supervisors. So it decreased their call-outs. They were taking off work less because they felt like there was a little bit more predictability in the operation.
And right amount of employee manpower, if you will, man and woman power there when you need it, I would imagine. We're getting a question here that I am actually going to punt over to Charlie for Scott and Sonny to talk about, and it's what actions are you taking around IT workforce retention, reskilling, remote work challenges? Well, I'll throw that one actually over to you. How about that?
Sure. So TSA.
Well, actually, I was talking about.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
Kevin.
I'll do it because I think it's kind of a joint question, right? So
Yeah, I just didn't want to put that on you since you're not technically in the IT organization. But if you want to talk about your organization, please. I mean, I think everyone's
I'll start, then I'll-
interested.
then I'll pass it over.
I just gave a plea for public service, so
Yeah.
have at it.
Yeah. So in our cloud broker program, what we did is we originally took very experienced people in our organization that had a kind of a jack of all trades, had network experience, had user experience, had security background, et cetera, and they started to lead our cloud broker program. So very senior IT, well paid, been with Intel a long period of time. But in order to bring in new cloud people, we brought in a series of junior employees to bring them through the organization so they too could become a cloud broker. And our experience was great because while they brought a lot of energy, as soon as we ended up training them, they went somewhere else, right? So we lost those people. And we did the same thing for the next year. We did the same thing by 2016. We had learned our lesson. We started hiring much higher end people as far as that's concerned. Now the challenge is, particularly in a multi-cloud environment, there's very few people have certifications across all three clouds, and the nuances are there, right?
And not all, right. I think a lot of these agencies, a lot of these CIOs have described that to me that, hey, we have a mastery in this cloud environment.
right.
And there's some nuances over it that we have to understand in the next cloud environment.
Right. And those, to us, at least as a practitioner, and I work with our practitioners every day, are significant. So what we do instead, we look for at least the senior people we hire, they have a great proficiency in at least one of those cloud service environments, whether it be AWS as an example, right? And then we simply have 2 other people or 3 other people in GCP, and then we have 4 other people as Azure. So while there's the cross-breeding in many ways, we had to increase the amount of people we had there, Luke, as far as this is concerned. But we no longer hire junior people in that role. We believe that it's the most key area of our agile growth, and the answer is we're not going to do it with junior people anymore. Just spoke about it this morning.
While I'm not in the IT organization and I can't speak to necessarily the specifics of how Yemi and team are recruiting and retaining the IT workforce, I can talk a little bit writ large as the agency. Our administrator, you may know, has recently been reconfirmed to another 5-year term.
Yep.
He's been really, really closely working with the Hill to advance a concept of pay equity. So when TSA stood up, it stood up on a shared value pay system. It wasn't the GS pay scale. And so our officers aren't paid in parity with the rest of the GS, the general schedule of the federal government. And so the administrator has been advocating, and I think Congress has gotten traction to be able to support the idea of a broad, across the workforce pay increase. Let's face it, hiring is difficult for everyone, no matter what industry you're in, right? Fortunately for us, TSA's economists did a fantastic job of projecting our return to travel, so we didn't get stuck in some of the same situations that the airlines have with regard to their workforce. But at the officer level, that pay equity should be able to help us with some of the retention associated with the attrition, which may help us maintain some balance of staff. From a headquarters perspective, we're operating in a hybrid work environment. Folks are really only required at headquarters to come in twice a pay period, and they're looking at now, a remote work process where they can file for and be granted the ability to remote work, which will then widen our net for the workforce in the public sector.
So we have 1 minute to do it. One more question. Okay, so let's take one from the field. There is a question in here about international travel and pre-screening, OCONUS. I think that sounds more like pre-check. And again, I'm going to throw that one over to Charlie and let them answer that. Any questions from the audience here live? Somebody's got to have a question.
If there isn't, I can talk about the international one-stop concepts that we're working on.
Please. Oh, wait, we got one here.
Good.
As a frequent traveler, I have a question that I'm curious on the technology side.
Wait, this is the Red Hat guy. Just announce who
Chris Wright,
just
Red
so
Hat.
for folks
Yeah.
that can't see.
Yeah, you bet. Chris Wright, Red Hat. I was curious, the public-private partnership that you described, how much of that is supported at the technology level? And I loved your SneakerNet example, and I'm sort of picturing using a private service as part of the boarding and check process. I imagine there's got to be some technology challenges in maybe the APIs that are shared between the private side and the public side. So I was curious, what is that? And it can't all be SneakerNet.
And if I could, because we're gonna sort of I'm gonna extrapolate a little bit because I know we have to close it out. As you're answering that, give us sort of a picture of the future. If we did have that entire environment connected, right, in anticipation of that's the ultimate desire, what is the expected experience going to be at that point? But let's talk about the way it is today and what you're trying to drive towards.
Sure, absolutely. So today, it's a very fragmented environment because the public-private partnership is one in which our airports and airlines are regulated entities. We issue the regulatory activity for their security programs. They then instantiate those in security plans and programming, which means each of their data systems is separate. It's just the ability of the authorities, if you will. Same thing with TSA and CBP. We have separate systems because we have different authorities, and we have to keep it within the legal aspects of what we are or aren't allowed to do. What we've been able to start pioneering and scratching the surface a little bit deeper on is the idea that we can have system of records notices and authorities conversations around where that data needs to be shared. And what we want to drive to is a better passenger experience, a more seamless environment where the folks that need to have the data across that journey have that data, right? Essentially, you have a passenger data profile, if you will. Some of it's a security element, some of it's a commerce element associated with where you're sitting and where you're interacting in the airport. But we're at that point where we've got to lean in and sort out how we can automate all of those components. There's a concept that you could use potentially in the future, your biometric opt-in as your token throughout the journey. You could be recognized at a merchant in the airport, pay for your items using your biometric as a token. There are vendors in industry out there that have suggested that, and we can lean in and see how that progresses.
So we will have a touchless experience through the sort of TSA checkpoint at some point in time, it sounds like.
Yeah, so
is that the end state desire?
TSA wants to get out of touching people. Right. We want to get out of that business.
We want you out of that business.
Thank you very much.
And when can we expect that? Is that a year
so I
out,
think
2 years out, 10 years out?
Parts of that are going to be there in the next probably 3 years.
Okay.
Other aspects of that are probably going to take a little bit longer, 5 to 6 years. In the United States, traveling internationally to the United States, you can do some compare and contrast real quick. Internationally, there's a lot of e-gates with aviation security. And that's because they only need the boarding pass. They don't care about the identity. They don't see it as a part of their mission because they didn't have a 9/11. They don't have a secure flight. And their border force handles the identity piece. In the United States, we care about that. It's together. And so just a moment to say, we're working on e-gates, but we have to do it in a way that's connected to secure flight. And so that's been our challenge, is making sure that we have the apparatus to be able to connect those and integrate that technology together. We're close. We have a prototype sitting in Las Vegas ready to go, and we're working with Yemi's team to be able to enable the connectivity. And so that's one that if we have the opt-in, you could do one-to-many matching against the travel verification system at CBP, and you could do a contactless entry into screening. And then if we can pilot that self-service screening concept, you may not ever have to talk to an officer in the screening process at all.
So that cloud, multi-cloud environment really makes a lot of sense. Look, we definitely don't want to be touched, but more importantly, we do want to stay safe. So we really do appreciate it. Matt, Kevin, we really do thank you for everything that you've done. And again, I want to, one more time, don't forget about that public service. You'll never regret it. Thank you.